Alright, so I said I would do a tutorial for my Connie, as well as my 144 and 747 and whatnot, just to make it a little easier for you to start and be able to operate it, so there's not any confusion and whatnot, in case you can't get something to work. So I'm just going to be going over how to start it, how to take off, and then how to land it properly, because there are some things that you need to know about it in order to use it properly. So first thing I'm going to start off with is the front gear here, which you'll notice is tilting. The real aircraft had nose gear that was pivoted forward in order to center the wheel when it was barreling down the runway. Now, because of this, I have to use two physics bodies, and when you have two physics bodies connected to each other, it makes the hinges significantly weaker, so the front gear is quite weak. Now, you still can taxi and land if you do it properly, and you won't have a problem, but if you are too hard on it, it will collapse. Unfortunately, right now, there is nothing I can do about this until there is an update to the game which either fixes this. But it's not too big of a deal, so I wouldn't worry about it. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to get started here. So we're going to turn on the battery, and we're going to get bus tie 1, 2, 3, and galley power on. Then we will turn on engine 1, 2, 3, and 4 oil pumps. And we're only going to use 2 generators. You only need to run off 2, it provides sufficient power, so you could either do 2 and 3, or you could do 1 and 4. For this case, I'm just going to do 1 and 4. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to open the start valves, and we're then going to open the cooling flaps. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and get on the hydraulic system. Hydraulic system A and B are on. And then we'll turn on bleed air for engine 1 and 4. You don't need to use the bleed air from the other 2 engines. It's better to have at least 2 on, so if one engine goes out, you still have bleed air. And then we'll turn on the forward and aft recirculation fan, and then the pack. After that, we'll go ahead and turn the yaw dampener, and then we'll get on to the fuel system. So there are 3 levers here. There's 1 for prop pitch, 1 for throttle, and 1 for fuel mixture. These levers will tell you what to do. So, for example, right here it says prop pitch, set to 0 on start. So we're going to go ahead and set this to 0. And then on the throttle, set it to 17 on start. This is just to get the engines to start up quicker. And then we will set the fuel mixture to full on start and 50% during flight. And you'll also turn it back to full when landing. Alright. So this aircraft has 4 different tanks. There is left wing tank, right wing tank, center tank, and aft tank. Now, one important thing to note is that if you're going to the Arctic, you always feed from the wing tanks, then aft tank, and then center tank last. And the reason for that is if you feed from the center tank and you leave all the way to the fuel in the aft tank, in real life, this has happened for some aircraft in some incidents. You could tip the aircraft backwards, so that's why you always go wing tanks, then you feed from the aft tank, and then you feed from center tank last, in order to make sure that doesn't happen. Alright, so we're going to feed from right wing tank, we'll turn on cross feed, turn on left wing tank, and we'll just go ahead and turn on the panel lights, and then we'll turn on the fuel pump for each engine right here. Alright, so now we're ready for start. So, this aircraft, and it wasn't on all the variants of the aircraft, but on the L1049 you have inertia starters. So what these are going to do is I'm going to start engine 1 and 4. It's also going to turn the magnetos. And what this is going to do is it's going to spin up the blade with electric motor, and then it's going to pop the clutch, and all that rotational energy will start the engine. So once you see the engine spike up in RPS, you can go ahead and turn off the starters. So, since you saw it look from the outside, let me show you what it's like from the inside. So you hit starters. These are going to reach no RPS right now because it's just spinning the blade, not the engine. Once these spike up to about 4 RPS, or 5, then you turn off the starters. Okay? Turn them off. Right. So now we're running. So, you don't need the battery on when you have generators going. However, if you are flying in a storm with any lightning, just keep the battery on just in case, so that way you don't lose complete power. But since we're not flying in those conditions, we're going to turn it off. And I'm also going to turn on the parking brake because the wheel glitch in Stormworks causes it to rotate for no reason, which is fun, which is just lovely. Alright, so now that we're not starting it anymore, we're going to set the throttle to idle, which is 0.11, and that is idle thrust. Alright, so next we're going to hop into captain seat, and we're going to look right down here, and this is the flight control right here. So we're going to turn on aileron, elevator, and rudder flight control. And then we're also going to turn on nose gear turning. After that, we'll turn on the avionics lights, flaps, and then we will move on to the upper panel. Alright, so these are, of course, optional. Strobes, beacon lights, and these two are not optional. This is anti-ice for left wing and right wing. If the temperature gets to -1, the engines, or the wings and the engines will begin to, it simulates ice buildup, and the engines will then begin to slow down, because there is no fuel heat, and then the engine will run at a significantly lower speed if the anti-ice is not on. And because of that, you will lose lift, simulating ice being on the leading edge of the wing. Right. So next we're turn on the nav, cockpit lights, and cabin lights. And then we're also going to turn on pitot heat. If the pitot heat is not on, you will not be able to read your speed or altitude if it gets frozen over. So that is also something you're going to want to keep in mind. So right here, it tells you the taxi speed that you need. So prop pitch for taxi is 20, and the throttle setting is 13 for taxi. Alright, so we're going to set that, 20. And I usually set it to 14 just to get it going. And then once you get rolling, you can set it back to 13. Alright, so at this speed, you won't be able to collapse the front gear. It'll be just fine. But after landing, the gear kind of gets pushed up a bit, and I'm not sure exactly what causes this, and the gear will be even weaker, and turning it completely like this will cause it to collapse. So after you've landed, at least once, just make sure to be very generous on the turning for it. So only just tap it to turn around, don't do just full turning like this. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up just a little bit faster just to get us turning here. And once we get just somewhat lined up, I'm just going to go ahead and take off. In fact, I could just take off now, so I'll just go ahead and go. But bring the prop pitch and throttle to full. Alright, go ahead and rotate. So when you take off, you'll notice that the front gear moves back just a bit. It's okay, it's not broken. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn off nose gear turning. I accidentally left the parking brake on. Don't do that. I'm going to bring the flaps up, and then the gear up. Alright, so it is normal for the back right gear to go up slower, because in real life, it's not actually that synchronized when the gear goes up, and sometimes there can be maybe the left wing gear, right wing gear, or nose gear, which goes up at a slower rate than the other, and so they can be sometimes going up at different times. And so that was just to kind of simulate it, so it's not broken. Alright, so now that we're in the air, we're going to go ahead and we're going to come back and land it creative, but I'm going to go over some things. So if you want to cruise at a pretty low speed just to be able to kind of fly around leisurely, I would set it to about 55. And this gives you the ability to where you're going just slow enough, but not toward the point you're stalling, that when you bank, you do turn quite a significant amount. So you can pretty much just leisurely fly around like this and just do whatever. But when you have, let's say, pitch hold right here, so we have two features, pitch hold and roll leveler. If these are on, it says 0.65, but you're going to have the throttle at least 0.62% in order to keep the aircraft in a very slow climb while holding your pitch. Alright, so when you have pitch hold on, make sure you're at least at 0.62. It's also so that way in wind, if it's opposing you and pushing you, you're not going too slow and you can still climb. Now, if the wind is coming from the back of the aircraft, set this up to about 0.65. And then that way it'll have enough speed to be able to keep the aircraft in the air. And it won't start slowly descending. Alright, another thing to note, another feature the actual aircraft had was a wing emergency flap shutdown. If one of the flaps gets stuck, go ahead and pull this, and whether or not the flaps are down and the switch is on, it will force them up. And then once they're up, if you want to see if you can fix them, go ahead and turn it off, bring the flaps down, and sometimes it'll actually fix it. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and go back and land at creative, but there's a couple things you need to know. So as I said before, the nose gear wheel after landing is slightly weaker. Once again, don't know exactly why. I'll be looking into that, seeing if there's anything I can do about it, but I'm pretty sure there's not much I can do. So when bringing the gear down in multiplayer, sometimes the back right gear will get stuck. This only happens in multiplayer, and I'm not surprised, quite frankly, but if that does happen, and it gets stuck, then bring the gear up, wait a bit, wait for the doors to open and close, and then bring the gear back down, and it won't be stuck anywhere. In single player, you shouldn't have to worry about this, though. Alright, so once we get a little closer, I'm going to go ahead and bring the gear down, bring the flaps down, and turn on nose gear turning. You're going to want that once you land. So, the prop pitch has reverse prop pitch. So, when the aircraft gets on the ground, you're going to set your reverse prop pitch to full. So, you can either hit the number 4 key to bring the prop pitch down and hold it. And then, once you have slowed down, bring your prop pitch to 0. You'll set your parking brake, and then you'll bring the throttle to idle of 0.11, which is your idle throttle. Okay, so let's go ahead and line up here. Oh, and there's a couple lights here. So this right here, if this light comes on, don't be alarmed. It just means the prop reverse is engaged. So it's nothing's wrong with the aircraft if that comes on. Alright, so I'll just go ahead and line up here. I don't know how this landing is going to go at creative, but we'll see. Alright, so for throttle, you're going to set your throttle to about 50% on landing. And a good thing to note is once you get about right here and you're just high enough, go ahead and set your throttle to about 45. This way, once you get in, I might go to 43, but this way the aircraft will let you flare, and you should be able to line up right here. I'm going to slow just a tiny bit more since we had more speed. Go ahead and flare. That was a horrible landing, that's okay. And now full reverse prop pitch. And don't jam the nose down, because you could break the front nose gear, which you don't want. Alright, so now we're going to turn the parking brake. We're going to set the prop pitch to 0, and we're going to bring the engines to idle. Alright, so that's pretty much all you have to do to take off, land, whatever. But just remember, after landing, be very cautious when turning nose gear, and go into third person and watch it. So if it starts to bend backwards, then just straighten the wheel, and then just do very slow incremental turns. Other than that, there's not much else to it. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on Discord or in the comments on the creation. Thank you.